The emergency alarm echoed through the halls of the Galactic Defense Council building. Admiral Rebecca Torres walked quickly down the long corridor, her boots clicking against the polished metal floor. She had been waiting 3 days for this meeting, 3 days while the Krillian horde moved closer to Haven Prime. Every hour that passed meant fewer chances for the 50,000 humans living on that distant world. The council chamber was huge, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. 3 different alien species sat at a curved table that wrapped around the room. The Vorthak looked like giant lizards with green scales and yellow eyes. The Nexari were tall beings made of living crystal that chimed when they moved. The Ethereals were harder to see, just glowing clouds of gas that floated in special containers. Torres stood in the center of the room, feeling small under their stares. She had been an admiral for 10 years, but humans had only joined the Galactic Alliance 20 years ago. That made her species the youngest members, and some aliens still saw them as children playing at war. "Admiral Torres," said Counselor Rax, the leader of the Vorthak military. His voice was deep and rough. "You have requested this emergency meeting. Speak." Torres kept her voice steady. "The Krillian horde has broken through our outer defenses. Their bioships destroyed 3 of our patrol stations yesterday. Intelligence reports show they are heading directly for Haven Prime. We need naval support immediately." The Nexari representative, whose crystal body sparkled in the light, made a sound like wind chimes. "Haven Prime has a population of only 50,000 humans. The Krillians bring 30 warships. The mathematical outcome is clear. The colony will fall." "That's exactly why we need help," Torres said, trying not to let anger show in her voice. "We can evacuate most of the civilians, but we need time. We need ships to hold the Krillians back." The ethereal counselor spoke in a voice like whispers in the wind. "Admiral, your species has contributed little to the Alliance military. You have no claim on our advanced vessels. The Vorthak battlecruisers and Nexari strike ships are needed elsewhere." Torres felt her hands form fists, but she kept them at her sides. "Then don't give me your advanced ships. Give me anything. Old patrol boats, cargo ships with weapons attached, mining vessels with armor plating. Anything that can buy those people time to escape." Counselor Rax leaned back in his chair. His yellow eyes studied her for a long moment. "You would take such vessels into battle against the Krillian horde? Their bioships are living weapons. They adapt to enemy tactics. They learn from each fight." "Yes," Torres said without hesitation. "I would take a garbage scow if it had weapons on it. Those are my people down there." The 3 counselors looked at each other. Torres could not read their alien expressions, but she sensed they were communicating in ways humans could not understand. The Vorthak had telepathic abilities. The Nexari could share thoughts through light patterns. The Ethereals were pure energy beings who spoke in emotions as much as words. Finally, Counselor Rax spoke again. "The Alliance has procedures, Admiral. We cannot simply give ships to any member species that asks. There are treaties, agreements, balance of power considerations. 50,000 people will die while you worry about paperwork," Torres said. Her voice was getting louder, and she forced herself to stay calm. Getting angry would not help her people. The Nexari chimed again. "The humans have been Alliance members for only 2 decades. In galactic terms, you are infants. Perhaps this loss will teach your species the reality of war." Torres stared at the crystal being. "We knew the reality of war before we met any of you. We fought wars on our home planet for thousands of years. We fought wars to reach the stars. We fought wars to build colonies on distant worlds. Don't lecture us about reality." The chamber fell silent. Torres realized she had spoken too harshly, but she could not take the words back. Her people were facing death, and these aliens were talking about mathematics and treaties. The ethereal counselor's voice became softer. "Your passion is noted, Admiral, but emotion does not change tactical realities. The Krillians have superior numbers and technology. Even our best ships would struggle against their fleet." "I'm not asking you to win the war for us," Torres said. "I'm asking for a chance to save civilians. Give me something, anything that can fight back. Let me show You what humans do when we're cornered. More silence. Torres could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Through the dome above, she could see the stars, and she wondered if any of them shone on Haven Prime. She wondered if the people there were looking up at the same stars, hoping someone would come to help them. Counselor Rax made a sound that might have been a sigh. The Alliance maintains reserve fleets, old ships that are no longer in active service. We could authorize the release of some of these vessels. Torres felt hope rise in her chest. What kind of ships? Whatever is available, the Vorthak said. I make no promises about their condition or capabilities. They may be cargo haulers, patrol boats, even construction ships. The reserve fleets contain whatever we have stored away. I'll take them, Torres said quickly. Whatever you have. Thyre, Nexari's crystal form flickered. Admiral, you do not understand. These are not warships. They are vessels that have been retired, forgotten, stored in distant shipyards. Some may not even function properly. I don't care, Torres said. My people built a colony on a world nobody else wanted. We survived ice storms and radiation bursts and plant diseases that could kill you in hours. We know how to make do with what we have. The ethereal counselor floated closer to her. Very well. We will authorize the release of available reserve vessels. You may take whatever ships can be made spaceworthy in the next 48 hours. Torres bowed her head. Thank you, counselors. My people will remember this. As she turned to leave, Counselor Rax called out to her. Admiral, the reserve fleets are spread across many systems. You may receive vessels from different member worlds. Do not be surprised if some are unfamiliar to you. Torres nodded and walked out of the chamber. She did not know what kind of ships the aliens would give her, but it did not matter. She had something to work with now. As she headed back to her transport, she began making plans. She would gather every ship they sent her, no matter how old or damaged. She would arm them with whatever weapons she could find. She would take them to Haven Prime and make the Krillians pay for every inch of space they tried to claim. 50,000 people were counting on her. She would not let them down. The evacuation was going too slowly. Admiral Torres watched the transport ships crawl away from Haven Prime like wounded insects, each one carrying as many civilians as possible. The orbital defense station where she waited felt empty and cold. Most of the crew had been sent to the planet's surface to help with the evacuation. Only essential personnel remained. Her small fleet floated nearby in the darkness of space. 3 human destroyers, 2 Nexari patrol craft, and 1 Vorthak escort ship. 7 vessels total against the 30 bioships of the Krillian horde. The math was simple and brutal. They would all die, but hopefully they could delay the enemy long enough for more civilians to escape. Lieutenant Davis looked up from his communication station. The young officer had dark circles under his eyes from 3 days without sleep. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from an incoming vessel. Long-range sensors show something big dropping out of hyperspace. Torres felt her stomach drop. If the Krillians had arrived early, the evacuation was doomed. Show me. The main screen flickered to life. At first, Torres saw only stars and empty space. Then something huge began to take shape as it emerged from the bright flash of hyperspace travel. The vessel was enormous, easily 3 times the size of her flagship destroyer. Its hull was dark gray metal with fresh welding marks and new armor plating. Weapon turrets covered its surface like thorns on a giant rose. My God, whispered Davis. What is that thing? Torres stared at the massive ship. It looked familiar, but she could not place where she had seen such a design before. The vessel was clearly built for war, with thick armor and heavy weapons. But the style was different from modern Alliance ships. It looked older, more brutal, like something from an earlier age of warfare. Ma'am, Davis said, his voice shaking slightly. It's transmitting human authentication codes. Torres blinked in surprise. Human codes? That's impossible. I know every ship in our fleet. The codes are valid, Admiral, but I've never seen this ship design in any database. On the screen, the massive vessel continued to approach. Torres could see details now that made her heart race. The ship had 6 main gun turrets, each one larger than the entire bridge section of her destroyer. Missile launchers lined its sides like the ribs of some metal beast. This was not just a warship, it was a ship built to destroy other warships. "This is Captain Reynolds of the UNS Retribution," came a voice over the communication system. Tharid Baikam. Voice was familiar, and Torres felt surprise and confusion mixed together in her mind. "Tom?" she said into her microphone. "Tom Reynolds?" "Hello, Rebecca. Sorry we're late. Had to dust off some old blueprints and get the engines running again." Torres knew Tom Reynolds well. He had been her instructor at the Naval Academy 15 years ago. A good officer and a better teacher, but he had lost his ship to Krillian raiders 6 months earlier. The official report said he was taking early retirement. So what was he doing commanding a battleship that should not exist? "Tom, what the hell? Are you flying out there?" "Something the Galactic Council probably forgot they had lying around in storage. We'll brief you properly when we dock. Is the situation as bad as the reports indicated?" Torres looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Krillian fleet. "Worse. 30 bioships, including at least 3 heavy assault types. They'll be here in 6 hours. Then we'd better get to work. Retribution out." The massive ship continued its approach to the defense station. Torres could see crew members moving on the observation deck, staring out at the newcomer. The alien patrol craft had pulled back, their crews no doubt as confused as she was. "Davis, get Captain Reynolds on a secure channel. I want to know everything about that ship before the shooting starts." "Yes, ma'am." "Admiral, should I inform the other ship commanders about our new arrival?" Torres thought about that. The Nexari and Vorthak crews were probably already analyzing the human vessel with their sensors. They would have questions, and she did not have answers yet. Not yet. Let me talk to Tom first. An hour later, the Retribution had docked with the defense station. The docking bay had to be expanded just to fit the massive ship's shuttle. Torres waited in the briefing room with her senior officers, trying to prepare for answers she could not imagine. Captain Tom Reynolds entered the room looking exactly as she remembered him. Gray hair, weathered face, and eyes that had seen, too, many battles. He wore a human naval uniform that looked somehow different from the current design. Older, more formal. "Hello, Rebecca. You look good for someone who's about to face impossible odds." "Tom, where did you get that ship? According to every database I can access, the UNS Retribution doesn't exist." Reynolds sat down and activated a portable holographic projector. The image that appeared showed the massive vessel from multiple angles, along with technical specifications. That made Torres gasp. "She's a Titan-class battlecruiser," Reynolds said calmly. "Built 32 years ago during the Colony Wars. Official records say all ships of this class were scrapped when humanity joined the Galactic Alliance." "Official records?" Reynolds smiled. "Official records can be incomplete. A few of us old-timers convinced some bureaucrats that mothballing was cheaper than scrapping. The ships were moved to hidden shipyards and forgotten about. Until now." Torres studied the specifications. The Retribution carried more firepower than her entire task force combined. Its armor was designed to withstand the kind of punishment that would destroy modern Alliance vessels. Most importantly, it was built according to human military philosophy: stand and fight rather than hit and run. How many people know about this? Enough. There are 12 ships in the reserve fleet, all pre-Alliance designs. When the Council authorized reserve fleet access, they didn't specify which reserve fleet. Torres felt a mixture of anger and admiration. "You kept an entire battle fleet secret for 30 years? We kept it in storage. There's a difference." Reynolds leaned forward. "Rebecca, the Alliance builds ships for speed and maneuverability. They fight wars by dancing around the enemy and wearing them down slowly. But humans fight differently. We build ships that can take damage and keep fighting. The Krillians have never faced anything like the Retribution. One ship against 30. One ship that was designed to fight multiple enemies at once. The Colony Wars were brutal, Rebecca. We built these vessels to face overwhelming odds and win through sheer firepower and determination." Torres looked at the holographic display again. The Retribution was not the most advanced ship she had ever seen, but it was the most powerful. Its weapons could crack asteroids. Its armor could withstand direct hits from weapons that would vaporize smaller vessels. And most importantly, it was here. What's her current condition? 90% operational. We've been maintaining all the reserve ships just in case. The crew is a mixture of retired officers and volunteers. Everyone who served during the colony wars understood that someday we might need these ships again. And you think one battlecruiser can stop the Krillian horde? Reynolds turned off the projector. I think 50,000 civilians deserve a fighting chance, and I think the Krillians are about to learn why humans built ships like this. Torres stood up. Then let's show them. Coffee tasted better when you might die in a few hours. Torres took another sip from the old metal cup and studied the battle plans spread across the table in the Retribution's war room. The ship's interior felt different from modern Alliance vessels. Everything was built thick and heavy, designed to keep working even when damaged. The walls were lined with actual metal instead of lightweight composites. The chairs were bolted to the floor instead of floating on magnetic fields. Captain Reynolds sat across from her, pointing to different sections of a tactical display. The Krillians use biological ships that can heal themselves during battle. Their standard tactics involve surrounding the enemy and wearing them down with continuous attacks. They expect us to run. But we're not going to run, Torres said. We're not going to run. The Retribution was built for a different kind of war. During the colony wars, human settlements were under constant attack from alien raiders. We couldn't retreat because we were protecting civilian populations, so we built ships that could take massive damage and keep fighting. Torres looked around the war room. The walls displayed technical drawings of weapons she had never seen before. Plasma cannons designed to fire continuously for hours without overheating. Missile systems that could reload automatically even with half the crew dead. Shield generators built in multiple sections so that losing one would not leave the ship defenseless. The Alliance Treaty required us to scrap all heavy warships, she said. Reynolds nodded. Article 7, Section 3. No member species shall maintain military vessels above cruiser classification without explicit council approval. But the treaty said nothing about storage. So you hid an entire fleet. We preserved an entire fleet. There's a difference. Reynolds activated another display showing ship locations across human space. 12 vessels total, all Titan-class battlecruisers, hidden in shipyards and systems the Alliance considers unimportant. We've been maintaining them for 30 years, rotating crews, keeping the weapons functional. Torres studied the display. Each ship was marked with a location and status report. Most showed green indicators for full operational status. A few showed yellow for minor repairs needed. None showed red. Who else knows about this? Every human admiral above the rank of Commodore, most senior captains, key personnel in the shipbuilding industry, and a few politicians who understand the importance of keeping options open. That's a lot of people to keep a secret. Reynolds smiled grimly. It's not really a secret, Rebecca. It's just information that nobody bothered to ask about. The Alliance assumed we followed their treaty completely. We did. We scrapped our active fleet, but we never agreed to destroy our historical vessels. Torres felt anger and admiration competing in her chest. You've been planning this for decades. We've been preparing for possibilities. The universe is a dangerous place, and humanity learned long ago that you can't always count on allies to save you. Sometimes you have to save yourself. A communication alert chimed softly. Lieutenant Commander Wilson, the Retribution's executive officer, appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of calm expression that came from years of combat experience. Captain, we're receiving sensor data from the outer system. The Krillian fleet has dropped out of hyperspace. 31 bioships, including 4 heavy assault vessels. Estimated arrival time at Haven Prime is 4 hours and 20 minutes. Reynolds looked at Torres. 31 ships. That's more than intelligence reported. They must have picked up reinforcements, Torres said. She activated her own communication device. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Prepare for combat operations. Execute defensive formation Echo 7. On the tactical display, the human and alien ships began moving into position. The 3 human destroyers formed a triangle with the defense station at the center. The Nexari patrol craft took positions on the flanks, ready to use their speed to harass enemy formations. The single Vorthak escort ship positioned itself to guard the evacuation transports. And in the center of it all, the Retribution held position, like a metal mountain. The massive battlecruiser dwarfed every other vessel in the system. Reynolds stood up and moved to the main display. Rebecca, there's something else you need to understand about these ships. They weren't just built to fight. They were built to win. He activated a series of combat recordings from the colony wars. Torres watched human battlecruisers engaging multiple enemy fleets. The tactics were simple and brutal. Advance directly toward the enemy, absorb their fire, and destroy them with concentrated firepower. No fancy maneuvering, no complex strategies, just raw determination and superior weapons. The alien races in the Alliance fight wars like chess games, Reynolds continued. They maneuver for advantage, look for weaknesses, try to win through cleverness. Humans fight wars like hammers. We identify the target and hit it until it breaks. Torres watched one recording where a single battlecruiser faced 7 enemy vessels. The human ship took massive damage but never stopped firing. By the end of the battle, all 7 enemy ships were destroyed, and the battlecruiser was still operational despite losing half its hull plating. The Krillians adapt to enemy tactics, she said. Their bioships learn from each engagement and modify their approach. That works against enemies who change their tactics. It doesn't work against enemies who don't have tactics, who just keep doing the same thing until they win. Reynolds paused the recording. The Retribution is going to do something the Krillians have never seen before. We're going to sit in one place and dare them to destroy us. That's not tactics, that's suicide. That's human warfare. And it's why we survived long enough to reach the stars. Torres finished her coffee and set the cup down. The metal made a solid sound against the table, nothing like the soft materials used on Alliance ships. Everything on the Retribution was built to last, built to endure, built to keep working no matter what happened. The other 11 ships, she said. Are they close enough to help? Reynolds shook his head. The nearest one is 3 days away at maximum speed. We're on our own. 1 battlecruiser against 31 bioships. 1 battlecruiser that was designed to face exactly this kind of odds. Rebecca, during the colony wars, humanity was outnumbered in every major engagement. We won because we built ships that could take more punishment than the enemy could deal out. The Krillians are about to learn why humans don't retreat. Torres looked at the tactical display one more time. The evacuation transports were still lifting civilians from Haven Prime's surface, but they would not be fast enough. The Krillian fleet would arrive before everyone could escape. The math was simple. Her small fleet had to hold the line long enough for the transports to clear the system. How long can the Retribution fight against those odds? Reynolds smiled, and for the first time since boarding the ship, Torres saw the expression she remembered from their academy days. It was the smile of someone who had found exactly the fight he was looking for. As long as it takes, Rebecca. As long as it takes. The Krillian bioships looked like nightmares made real as they appeared on the long-range sensors. Each vessel was a living creature the size of a city block, with organic weapons that pulsed like beating hearts. Their hulls writhed with tentacles and feeding tubes. They moved through space like giant sea creatures swimming through an ocean of stars. Torres watched from her destroyer's bridge as the enemy fleet formed up for attack. 31 bioships in perfect formation, their leader, a massive carrier-destroyer hybrid that dwarfed even the Retribution. The Krillians had been conquering worlds for 1,000 years, and their bioships adapted to every enemy they faced. They learned from each battle and modified their tactics, but they had never faced anything like the human reserve fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Torres, she announced on the fleet communication channel. The enemy fleet will reach firing range in 12 minutes. Execute defensive formation Echo 7. Hold your positions until my command. Her small force moved into position. The 3 human destroyers spread out to provide overlapping fields of fire. The Nexari patrol craft took flanking positions where their speed could be most effective. The Vorthak escort ship stayed close to the defense station, ready to protect the civilian evacuation ships still loading passengers on Haven Prime's surface. And in the center of it all, the Retribution held its position like an iron mountain. The massive battlecruiser's weapons were trained on the approaching enemy fleet, its armor plating reflecting the light of the system's star. "Enemy fleet at maximum weapons range," reported Lieutenant Davis from his sensor station. "They're beginning to spread out for envelopment tactics." Torres nodded. The Krillians were following their standard battle plan: surround the enemy, attack from multiple angles, and wear them down with continuous fire. It worked against Alliance forces who relied on speed and maneuverability. But the human reserve fleet was not built for dancing around the battlefield. "Captain Reynolds," she called on the private command channel, "are you ready?" "We've been ready for 30 years, Rebecca. Retribution to all ships, and when they open fire, don't scatter. Hold the line." The first salvo came from the Krillian lead ship. Bioplasma weapons lit up space like green lightning, each shot carrying enough energy to vaporize a building. The organic projectiles curved through space, guided by the bioship's targeting systems. Torres's destroyer shook as enemy fire struck its shields. Around her, the other Alliance ships began their defensive patterns, moving quickly to avoid the worst of the damage. But the Retribution did not move. The massive battlecruiser sat motionless as bioplasma bursts exploded against its hull. The shields flared with each impact, but they held. More importantly, the battlecruiser's armor absorbed the hits that got through. Sections of hull plating glowed red-hot under the assault, but the ship remained operational. "All weapons, open fire," Reynolds ordered. The Retribution's main battery spoke with a voice like thunder. 6 heavy plasma cannons fired simultaneously, their combined energy output greater than the weapons of Torres's entire destroyer squadron. The concentrated barrage struck the lead Krillian bioship dead center. The organic vessel simply disintegrated. One moment it was there, a living weapon the size of a skyscraper. The next moment it was expanding gas and debris. "Holy," Lieutenant Davis breathed, staring at his tactical display. The other Krillian ships paused for a moment as if surprised by the destruction of their leader. Then they resumed their attack with increased fury. Bioplasma weapons fired continuously, creating a storm of green energy that lit up the darkness of space. Torres's destroyer danced through the enemy fire, its point defense systems working overtime to stop the projectiles that came too close. The Nixari patrol craft used their superior speed to stay ahead of the organic weapons. The Vorthak escort ship relied on its heavy shielding to absorb damage. But the Retribution stood firm in the center of the storm and traded shot for shot with the entire Krillian fleet. The battlecruiser's weapons fired in a steady rhythm. Every few seconds, another bioship died under the concentrated fire of the human heavy cannons. The Krillians had superior numbers, but they had never faced an enemy that could match their firepower shot for shot. "Retribution is taking heavy damage," reported Wilson over the command channel. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 9, main generator at 80%, but all weapons remain operational." Torres could see the damage on her tactical display. The massive battlecruiser was being pounded by enemy fire from a dozen different angles. Sections of armor glowed white-hot. Atmosphere leaked from damaged hull plates. But the ship kept fighting. More bioships died under the Retribution's guns. The Krillians began changing their tactics, trying to find weaknesses in the human defensive formation. Some ships tried to get behind the battlecruiser where its weapons could not target them. Others attempted to overwhelm the smaller Alliance vessels. "Torres to all ships," the Admiral announced. "Close formation on the Retribution. Use her shields for cover." The human destroyers moved closer to the battlecruiser, taking advantage of the massive ship's defensive systems. The alien patrol craft followed suit, forming a tight defensive sphere around the human flagship. The Krillians responded by concentrating all their fire on the Retribution. Every bioship in their fleet targeted the battlecruiser at once. The space around the human vessel became a hell of green energy and organic projectiles. But still, the Retribution fought. Its weapons never stopped firing. Every shot found a target. Every hit destroyed or crippled an enemy vessel. The Krillian fleet was being ground down by the simple human tactic of standing in place and shooting back harder than they were being shot at. "Retribution to fleet," Reynolds called out, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "We can do this all day. How about you?" As if in answer to his question, 3 more bioships exploded under the Battlecruiser's fire. The Krillian formation began to waver as their numbers dropped below 20. These creatures were used to fighting enemies who would eventually retreat or be overwhelmed. They were not prepared for an enemy that would simply absorb punishment and keep fighting. Torres checked her chronometer. The battle had been going for 3 hours. The evacuation transports from Haven Prime were finally clearing the planet's gravity well, loaded with civilian refugees. Soon they would be far enough away to make the jump to hyperspace. "Admiral," reported Davis, "the last evacuation transport has cleared the atmosphere. They're requesting permission to jump to safety." "Granted," Torres replied. "Get them out of here." One by one, the civilian ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying 50,000 people to safety. The defense of Haven Prime had accomplished its mission. But the battle was far from over. The Retribution was badly damaged now. Whole sections of the ship were dark, their power systems destroyed by enemy fire. But the main weapons were still operational, and Captain Reynolds continued to fire them with mechanical precision. Another bioship died. Then another. The Krillian fleet had been reduced to 15 vessels, and their formation was breaking apart. For the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, the bioships were facing an enemy they could not adapt to defeat. "Enemy fleet is withdrawing," Davis reported with amazement in his voice. Torres looked at her tactical display. The remaining Krillian ships were indeed pulling back, moving away from the human battle line. The organic vessels had taken more losses than they could accept. For creatures that relied on adapting to enemy tactics, facing an enemy with no tactics was impossible to overcome. "Let them go," Reynolds said over the command channel. "We've accomplished what we came to do." Torres looked at the retribution on her display. The massive battlecruiser was a wreck, with hull breaches, failed systems, and armor that had been melted by enemy fire. But it was still operational, still fighting, still ready to face whatever came next. That was the difference between human warships and Alliance vessels. The Retribution had been built to absorb damage and keep fighting. It had been designed by people who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to be too stubborn to lose. Silence felt strange after 6 hours of weapons fire. Torres floated in the shuttle bay of the Retribution, looking up at the massive battlecruiser that had saved 50,000 lives. The ship was a mess of melted armor and emergency repairs, but it was still in one piece. Somehow, impossibly, the ancient human warship had survived a battle against impossible odds. The medical teams were finishing their work. 14 crew members had been injured during the fighting, but none had died. It was a miracle considering the amount of firepower the Krillians had thrown at them. The ship's armor and design had protected the crew, even when the hull was being torn apart by bioplasma weapons. Torres found Captain Reynolds in the engine room, supervising repairs to the main power systems. His uniform was torn and stained with hydraulic fluid, but he was smiling. It was the smile of someone who had just proved that old ways of doing things were sometimes the best ways. "Casualty report?" she asked. 14 wounded, all stable condition. Engineering teams estimate we'll have full power restored within 12 hours. Weapon systems are already back online. Reynolds wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth. Amazing what proper armor can do. Torres looked around the engine room. It was built like everything else on the ship. Heavy, redundant, designed to keep working even when damaged. Multiple backup systems for every critical function. Power conduits that could be rerouted if sections were destroyed. It was engineering, philosophy from an earlier age when humans expected their ships to take damage and keep fighting. "The Council is going to have questions," she said. Reynolds chuckled. "I imagine they will. 3 different counselors have already sent priority, communications demanding explanations. The Vorthak military representative seems particularly upset about treaty violations. And what are we going to tell them?" "The truth. They asked for any ship we could spare from the reserve fleet. The UNS Retribution was in reserve status for 32 years. Technically, we provided exactly what they requested. Torres shook her head. Tom, you know they're going to demand we scrap the other 11 ships. Maybe. Or maybe they'll realize that having human battlecruisers in the reserve fleet is actually useful. Reynolds activated a damage control display showing the ship's current status. Besides, Rebecca, consider the mathematics. One human battlecruiser fought 31 Krillian bioships and won. How many Alliance vessels would it have taken to achieve the same result? Probably 60 or 70 ships. Exactly. From a resource allocation standpoint, maintaining our reserve fleet is highly efficient. Torres walked over to one of the main engine assemblies. The massive fusion reactor was humming quietly, producing the enormous amounts of power needed to run a ship this size. Everything was built to military specifications from an era when humanity expected to fight wars of survival. The other ships in the reserve fleet, she said, are they all as powerful as this one? The Retribution is actually one of the smaller battle cruisers. The flagship, the UNS Defiance, is twice this size. And there are 2 Dreadnought-class vessels that make the Defiance look like an escort ship. Torres felt her breath catch. Dreadnoughts? How big are we talking about? The UNS Indomitable is 8 kilometers long and carries enough firepower to crack a moon. The UNS Relentless is slightly smaller but has experimental weapons that were never used during the colony wars. Dear God, how did you hide ships that size? Reynolds smiled again. Very carefully and in very remote locations. The beautiful thing about space is that it's mostly empty. Hide something far enough from normal shipping lanes and nobody will ever find it. A communication alert sounded through the engine room. Lieutenant Commander Wilson's voice came through the speakers. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Defense Council. All 3 counselors want to speak with Admiral Torres immediately. Torres and Reynolds exchanged glances. Put them through to the main briefing room, Reynolds said. We'll be there in 5 minutes. The briefing room's main screen showed 3 very unhappy alien faces. Counselor Rax of the Vorthak military looked like he wanted to bite something. The Nexari representative's crystal form was flickering with agitated light patterns. Even the usually calm ethereal counselor seemed more solid than usual, indicating strong emotions. Admiral Torres, Counselor Rax began, his voice filled with barely controlled anger. You will explain how a human battlecruiser came to participate in this engagement. Such vessels violate multiple alliance treaties. Torres kept her expression neutral. Counselor, you authorized the release of any ships available from the reserve fleet. The UNS Retribution was indeed in reserve status. Reserve status does not mean active military capability, the Nexari chimed angrily. Our mathematical models indicated you would receive decommissioned patrol craft or cargo vessels. Your mathematical models were incomplete, Torres replied. You didn't specify which reserve fleet or what condition the ship should be in. Captain, Reynolds simply took a ship that was available and made it operational. The ethereal counselor's voice was like wind through ice. This vessel's very existence threatens the balance of power established by our treaties. How many other ships does humanity possess in secret? Reynolds stepped forward. With respect, Counselor, they're not secret. They're just not actively deployed. The Alliance Treaty prohibited maintaining military vessels above cruiser classification in active service. All our battle cruisers have been in storage for over 30 years. Storage implies non-functional status, Rax growled. This ship was clearly combat ready. We've been maintaining our historical vessels, Torres said, just as the Vorthak maintained their ancient war temples and the Nexari preserved their crystal ships from the first expansion. These are cultural artifacts as much as military hardware. The 3 counselors looked at each other. Torres could sense they were communicating through their various telepathic and energy-based methods. Finally, Counselor Rax spoke again. The outcome of this engagement was unexpected. Our projections indicated total loss of the human colony and your task force. Instead, 50,000 civilians were saved and the Krillian horde was driven off, Torres said. I would call that a successful mission. The Nexari representative's crystal form chimed thoughtfully. The mathematical implications are significant. One human vessel achieved what our model suggested would require a full battle fleet. This changes our understanding of human military capabilities. It changes nothing, the ethereal counselor whispered. Treaty violations cannot be overlooked simply because they produce favorable results. Torres felt her patience wearing thin. Counselors, we followed your authorization exactly. You asked for any ship we could spare. We provided one. The fact that it was more effective than expected is not a treaty violation. How many other vessels exist in this reserve fleet? Rax demanded. Reynolds and Torres exchanged glances. This was the moment of truth. 11 other battlecruisers of similar capability, Reynolds said calmly. Plus, support vessels and supply ships. All have been in storage since before humanity joined the Alliance. The silence that followed was profound. Torres could hear the ship's life support systems humming in the background, the only sound in a room full of shocked alien representatives. 12 battlecruisers, the Nexari finally said, each capable of engaging multiple enemy fleets single-handedly. Each built specifically to defend human colonies against overwhelming odds, Torres corrected. We're not an aggressive species, counselors, but we are a stubborn one. The ethereal counselor seemed to solidify further. These vessels must be decommissioned immediately. The balance of military power in the Alliance cannot be disrupted. Or, Torres said carefully, they could be integrated into Alliance defense planning. The Krillian horde is still out there, and there are other threats on the rim worlds. Having reserve battlecruisers available for emergencies seems like good strategic planning. Counselor Rax leaned back in his chair. His yellow eyes studied Torres for a long moment. You propose to make these vessels available to the Alliance? We propose to keep them in reserve status exactly as they have been for 30 years. But now the Alliance knows they exist. If a situation arises where heavy firepower is needed quickly, we can activate them. Under Alliance command? The IT Nexari asked. Under human command serving Alliance interests, Reynolds said. Just like today. The three counselors began communicating again, their alien methods of discussion excluding the humans from the conversation. Torres waited patiently, knowing that anger or impatience would only hurt their position. Finally, the ethereal counselor spoke. The colony world survives. 50,000 beings continue to exist because of this oversight. The Alliance honors successful missions regardless of the methods employed. Torres felt relief wash over her. Thank you, counselors. However, Rax added, full documentation of these reserve vessels must be provided to Alliance Command within 30 days. No more surprises. Understood, Torres replied. The transmission ended, leaving Torres and Reynolds alone in the briefing room. They looked at each other for a moment. Then Reynolds started laughing. Full documentation, he said between chuckles. Do you think they really want to know about the experimental weapons on some of those ships? Torres smiled. Let's start with the basic specifications and see how they handle those. Through the briefing room's viewport, she could see Haven Prime in the distance. Transport ships were already returning to the planet's surface, bringing the evacuated civilians home. The colony would survive and grow. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, 11 other human battlecruisers waited patiently for the next time they would be needed. Tom, she said quietly, remind me to never underestimate human stubbornness again. Rebecca, he replied, that's the most important lesson humans have to teach the galaxy. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to be too stubborn to quit. The Retribution hung in space around Haven Prime for another week, undergoing repairs and taking on supplies. When the ancient battlecruiser finally departed for its hidden shipyard, the colonists lined the observation decks of their orbital stations to watch it go. They understood that they had witnessed something special, the moment when humanity reminded the galaxy that survival was not just about advanced technology or clever tactics. Sometimes survival was about building something strong enough to last and being stubborn enough to use it when everything else failed.